YouTube, what's up? It's Canuck News. Today we got a couple of hot topics. Number one being the tariffs on Canada at 25%, as well as we got some border security issues with America. And we're just going to tap in to see if Donald Trump was really right about some of the national security threats that are coming in from Canada to America over the border. Let's get into the video.
Trump may not have intended to stir up a new election issue here in Canada, but since he threatened a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods if those two countries didn't help stop the flow of drugs and illegal aliens into the US, is the Canadian border a real threat to the US, or is this just political leverage?
I truly don't believe that this was anything to stir up an election or to stir. I think it was just to distract Justin Trudeau from the real issue of the border. I believe that Donald Trump did a fabulous job at doing it and making him come down to talk with a president-elect, someone who's not even a president yet. Like, do you believe that he should have went down and talked to someone who doesn't share any type of power right now in the White House, and instead of talking to the actual government in charge? Like, don't you think that would have been a better decision? And again, anything that Justin Trudeau does is always a failure, or some type of written words in between lines that you have to siphon through to make sure that the deal is what it is, and half the time it really isn't. So, and there's tons of immigrants who are crossing the border through farmers' fields in New York. So we're going to look at one of the next clips coming up that describes a farmer and how he's capturing numerous amounts of crowds of immigrants just walking past his house, over his land, through his land to get across the Canadian border.
And spoke to a family whose farm backs out onto the border between Quebec and New York State. This video you're seeing is from the farm's security cameras. It shows just how many people they've witnessed crossing their property to enter the US. And in July, he said he counted 48 people in just 1 week right near his doorstep.
And that's just one camera in one area. So it's hard to say how many actually didn't walk by my camera that catches them.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Did you say, I think the main thing that you should take from that clip is the amount of people that he's seeing is not all the people that are coming across. It's just the ones on camera that are crossing past his house. That's not to mention the ones that are going through the forest. It's not to mention the ones that are just going around the cameras. It's not to mention the ones that just aren't caught on camera. So that's right there as an alert. You don't know who's coming into the country, and we don't ever track anybody coming into the country. So it makes our national security even worse. So you kind of start to go back and forth. Do you agree with Donald Trump? And not in the way of saying he's right for putting 25% tariffs, but I do agree that there is a problem at the border and there's something we need to do about it. Mexico has crazy high numbers too, like 4 times ours, but their numbers are coming down. So it's not about how high it's always been, because the border between Mexico and America has always been infiltrated with immigrants and illegal aliens. But for us, it's getting out of control.
1.5 million arrests at the southern border is actually 500,000 fewer than the number of arrests in 2023 and almost 700,000 fewer than in 2022. The US tightened its asylum rules a few months ago. Southern border crossings have been dropping even more dramatically. So, they say, yes, the scale of the problem on the Mexican border is larger, but they're starting to get that under control. What's getting out of control is the situation up here in Canada.
If there's one thing I've noticed about the Canadian government this time, is that they're very reactive. They're not proactive. And when I say that, I mean that they wait for another country, another person, someone else of power to do something before they catch on. Like, we've had 9 years with this government, and not once did they think to up the numbers at the border. The CBSA has actually been asking for more help, more provisions, so that they can make more arrests and actually stop the illegal crossings over the border. But instead of us trying to tap into security and national security, we've tapped into wokeness and being more woke in the government and changing the vibes. God help us.
Alien smuggling, drug trafficking has always happened on a small scale, but it's increased significantly.
The vast majority of these new crossings on the Canadian border are happening in one very specific area, known as the Swanton sector, which has Ontario and Quebec on one side, and on the other, New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire.
Like, this is one of the main highways that immigration is coming over the border. Like, why haven't we ramped up some type of security there? Why haven't we put any more officers there? Like, I don't know if you guys seen just recently in the House of Commons, Jagmeet Singh saying how we need 1,000 CBSA workers just to come up to the standard of basic security at the border. 1,000 more Canadians. Like, so there's things that need to be done in Canada to open up jobs, to open up opportunities for people. Let's see if the Liberal government will now take heed with some of these threats and some of these tactics from Donald Trump. Because it seems to be working, and if we can just get Donald Trump to say axe the tax, then and only then will we might be on a road to redemption.
You got a lot fewer resources up here in Border Patrol agents, so they're overwhelmed. And they're not catching a lot of them because there's only so much the few resources up here can do.
In 2024, 43 pounds of fentanyl, 72 pounds of heroin, and 185 pounds of meth were seized at the Canadian border. But just look at what came across the Mexican border into the US that year. As with the border crossing numbers, there's just no comparison.
Yeah. Canada has a real problem with the drugs coming in at the border. We don't check any type of trains coming in on crate. We don't really check anybody when it comes to the airport no more, apparently, which you're going to see later on in this clip. We have a lot of resources that we've lightened up on as far as security. I remember when everyone used to say, it's so hard to get into Canada. It's so hard to get citizenship into Canada. Now people are coming into Canada with false documentation, not even being checked. There's a lot of people that are here that their visas are expired already and they still haven't left. They're looking for work, cash jobs. They're looking for residence without any papers, without any type of documentation from the government. Canada is absolutely in a national security, but it's not like we're reporting it because it's things that we technically don't have on paper. So it's being unseen, so it's being unreported. Which also taps into the comment that I was making earlier about how we're more reactive and not proactive, because now we have immigrants here, which we're probably going to hear in the future that we're going to have to do like a mass overhaul. We're going to have some type of new organization that opens up to get rid of all the immigrants that have been untracked and that are here.
Knowing how much is coming in, people, illegal goods such as illegal firearms, opioids that come into the country. We're largely in the dark. The CBSA is at a level of staffing where there's whole modes that we're not really doing anymore. We don't look at rail at all. We don't know what comes into the country through rail. Airports, we've almost fully automated, so we're speaking to almost no one coming through an airport anymore.
Hey, come on, Canada. Come on, get it together. Like, that is just ridiculous. You got unions that are just aware of the problem but can't do anything about it. And you can't blame them because they're only doing what they're able to do to the best of their reach. There's a lot of CBSA border securities that are saying they don't have the law, they don't have the permission, they don't even have the power to arrest when they see something going down illegal. All they can do is wait for the illegal action to happen on Canadian soil. It doesn't matter that they can see all the illegal immigrants on the American soil. They can't pursue or do nothing as a Canadian CBSA border security officer. So those are some of the changes that we need to change and give the CBSA more enforcement laws, more power to stop the immigration and the illegal aliens coming across the border.
There has been understanding from Canada that they can't be a gateway to terrorists coming into the United States. Canada has the most lax immigration policies, I think, in the world. I mean, that's why so many special interest aliens cross through the Canadian border.
Into the United States from most countries around the world. It's going to be kind of intense. Officials generally cross-reference a wider range of intelligence databases and terrorist watch lists than Canada does. They might also call you in for a physical interview.
We need to step that up to that degree. We need to have that same type of security, like fingerprints on passports, fingerprints on documentation, making sure we're knowing who we're talking to, physically seeing that person and making sure that all their documentation falls in line. Like, this should not be a rush to get people into Canada. I don't know why we decided that we needed all these immigrants in Canada just because there was a job shortage when we had 1 million Canadians here that wanted to work but were upset after the pandemic due to the fact that all their employers fired them due to a shot of medical decision that they wanted to make or they weren't allowed to make. So a lot of workers stood down and didn't come back, like all the nurses, a lot of doctors, a lot of tradespeople, a lot of people in a lot of industries stood down because they're very disappointed with their employer for letting them go. Some people have been working for the company for 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden the pandemic happens and people wanted to describe you as a threat and make you the problem and act like you're the only reason why we're not getting better or why the world's not going back to the way it was, and fire you. Take away your wages. That does something to someone's mental. To take away someone's wages and the means to feed their family, the means to be able to live their life, and just now they still have bills to pay. life still goes on. So it was a big disappointment from the Canadian employers, from the Canadian government to back that situation. And I just don't think Canadians have forgiven them since.
The Canadian government loosened further some of its entry requirements, and the rest of the world started to take notice.
In India, there are basically travel packages that you can arrange to get you to Canada and to the US, where you pay a certain amount, you're guided through or helped with the visitor's visa process.
There you go. There you have it right there. You have another person who's absolutely telling you why there is so much illegal aliens here. Because in other countries, they've noticed that we've loosened our laws. So they're making immigrant fraudulent packages to get into Canada. Are you serious? We are so unprotected that other countries are working against us and there's no laws to stop them. There's nothing that they're going to take any type of accountability for as far as their citizens coming over here illegally. But we're supposed to stand by as Canadians and just take it. That's why Canadians have had enough. That's why Canadians say, forget immigration for now. We need a cap. We need to stop immigration. We can't afford to feed ourselves. We can't afford to go on living in life like this, especially when the cost for one single immigrant is between $65,000 to $85,000 per immigrant out of Canadian tax dollars. That is just, it's not plausible to live like that as a Canadian. So that's going to be the final clip for today, guys. Tell me what you think in the comments. Do you think Donald Trump was right for trying to pull this little tactic, or do you think that he's serious about his 25% tariffs on Canada? And if you could, please, once and for all, leave me an HBO special. That's that help a brother out with that like, comment, or subscribe, and I'll see you in the comments.